call Mr. Stewart Dickson.
Deputy Speaker. I rise to oppose the original motion and to support the amendment on the floor here today. My colleagues and I have no particular appetite for the full force of the reforms that are taking place in the rest of the United Kingdom. We recognise that there has been a negative impact in Great Britain, but we also recognise where our block grant comes from, something which the party to my right seems to completely and utterly misunderstand. It comes from Westminster, and we do not have the resources in Northern Ireland to maintain an independent welfare system. We therefore have to work on the basis of parity with Northern Ireland variances that can and have been negotiated on top of that. To argue otherwise is to reject the political and economic reality. The place to oppose welfare cuts was at Westminster, and that is what we in Alliance did, Mr. Speaker, and indeed others in this House. But there are those who did not go to make the arguments or walk through the lobbies. And I know members of Sinn Féin will say, "Oh, but we have a mandate not to take our seats." No. Well, I would argue, because I've heard your argument before, I would argue that they have a greater duty to show responsibility and leadership by working for the well-being of their constituents, who they are clearly putting second to stubborn ideology. That's what Sinn Féin are doing, putting their constituents in second place to their stubborn ideology. And now, Mr. Speaker, Deputy Speaker, to rub salt in the wounds, Sinn Féin's grandstanding, aided by the mini-me SDLP and an abstentionist Ulster Unionist party. Abstentionist! There must be former Ulster Unionist leaders spinning in their graves that they should be announcing abstention in this historic chamber today. They are hurting the poorest and the most vulnerable by squeezing essential public services. That's the outcome of this opposition. The penalties are real, Mr. Speaker. I will give way.
Thank you for giving way. And would he accept that the argument which has been made by the Ulster Union spokesman, that the proper place for debating this legislation is on the floor of the Assembly? We've had a first reading, a second reading, a committee stage, all of which the member who made the claim took part in. What could be more parliamentary than that? So he can't actually say that he's against this because it hasn't gone through the proper parliamentary process.
Member has an extra minute.
I agree, Mr. Speaker, with Mr. Wilson. The penalties are real, Mr. Speaker. All £87 million of them are real. They are already having a negative impact, as ministers quite rightly prepare. Ministers quite rightly prepare for difficult days ahead.
Must I remind members where it is clear that a member does not wish to give way, another member should not pursue it.
Deputy Speaker, the negative impact is already being seen, as we can see from comments made by, for example, the Justice Minister in the Belfast Telegraph today. Quite rightly, they are preparing for very difficult days ahead should these reforms not be agreed. Members need to accept reality, along with the fact that there is a finite amount of money available. Members and parties can promise their constituents everything under the sun, but the cake is only a certain size. What is expected of us in this chamber is to solve problems, not exacerbate them by meaningless campaigns. So, Mr. Speaker, I would ask members who continue to block these reforms, what are your detailed proposals? Where is your master plan for getting round the huge financial dependency on transfer payments from Westminster? I certainly have seen no evidence of it from either of any of the parties who are opposing this in the chamber today. I suspect that is because there is no plan, and that other than to continue to run away from reality and to wave placards, they have no meaningful plans, no proposals and no way forward. In contrast, Speaker, on the table there is an existing package of concessions that is superior to what is being implemented in the rest of the UK. If we move forward with these proposals, we can avoid the £87 million of penalties and look at what additional measures we may be able to take to mitigate the most negative elements of welfare reform. That is the challenge that faces us. I would encourage the Minister and the Department not only to bring forward the bill, but to bring forward further proposals for changes to help to mitigate the issues that are rightly of concern to all members in this chamber. But not addressing the issue further hits the poor and the most vulnerable in society. £87 million of cuts will surely have a negative impact on the provision of health services, education, child poverty interventions, upskilling, employment schemes and job creation. That's what you're holding back. All of those would help people to escape from welfare dependency, improve real-life outcomes and create opportunities, rather than handing money back to the Treasury in fines, which we could be using to invest further in these areas. Finally, Mr Speaker, this is about facing up to reality. Therefore, I would challenge those parties in the Executive who continue to block reform. Face up to your responsibilities. Be prepared to take challenging decisions. Let this bill come forward so we can begin to retake control of this issue and agree a way forward that works for all of the citizens in Northern Ireland. Thank you.